Hi, my name is Gloria, and I'm going to make Boeuf Bourguignon, a recipe that I learned to make through reading the Mastering the Art of French Cooking by Julia Childs. The first thing I have to do is turn on the oven to 4 1/4 to heat it up. And then I'm going to take the beef, the chuck meat that I'm using, which comes from the neck of the cow. So here's all the beef cut up into cubes, which the butcher did for me. I'm sprinkling some flour over the beef, and I'm going to put that in the oven and leave it there for about 9 minutes for it to brown and for the flour to cook. So the flour not just serves as a browning agent, but also serves as a thickener for the sauce at the end. So here we go. The beef is in the oven, and that has to cook for about 9 minutes. 9 minutes later, we go back to our oven. We take out the pan, we give it a shake, and we add a little more flour and put it back in the oven for another few minutes. Actually, shake it again to make sure all the pieces are shaken. And we put it back in the oven for about another 7 or 8 minutes until the pieces are really hot and brown and sizzle in the pan. Now that our meat has browned, we take it out of the oven again, and we put it into a heavy Dutch oven, leaving all the drippings from the meat in the pan, because we're going to add those to our onions when we cook them. And every pan has a different circumference, a different height. So the meat, basically, the rule of thumb is that the meat has to be mainly covered by the wine. And you can add enough wine to do it, and then if you don't want to use all wine, if you want to cut it a little bit, then you can add some beef stock. And we now are lucky to have these boxed beef stocks that we can use instead of the cubes that we used years ago, which are really too salty. These are not as salty. Just add a little bit of beef stock to barely cover the meat. And at this point, we add our herbs. We add a bay leaf. We add some thyme, a couple of teaspoons of thyme, and then we add a smashed piece of garlic. I don't bother using a garlic press because it's very hard to get the garlic out of the press, and then you have to clean the press, so I just smash it and stick it into the beef. Then we stir that around. We're going to bring the beef to a boil, and then we're going to reduce it to a simmer and then put on the bottom level of our preheated oven, which has been preheated to 4 1/4, but I'm going to reduce it to 325. So now we're waiting for the beef to come to a boil. Our beef has now come to a boil, so I'm going to add the tomato paste to it. And it's easier sometimes to mix in tomato paste when the liquid is boiling. It works into the sauce quicker than when it's cold. So it's all boiling, the tomato paste is in. Turning off the stove, and I'm going to cover the pot and put it into our oven at 325 degrees, where it's going to cook for about an hour, a couple of hours actually. You just have to keep checking it every once in a while to be sure that the liquid hasn't gone down too much and the oven hasn't overheated. If it does go down, we have to add more liquid, so it just requires a little bit of vigilance. But for the moment, we are leaving it into the oven. The beef is cooking in the oven, so it's braising in the oven. So now I'm going to prepare the mushrooms that get added to it. I've cut all these mushrooms into quarters. This is a stew, possibly a fancy French stew, but it's still a stew. So I cut them in quarters, which is a more country-like feel than cutting them in thin slices, and they maintain their shape as they're cooked with the stew. So I'm adding trans-fat-free margarine to my pan. This will melt in a moment, and then we'll add the mushrooms, and after that we're going to braise our onions, beginning to sizzle a little. Okay. The margarine is sizzling, as you can hear, so I'm going to add the mushrooms all at once. Be careful that the spatter doesn't get on you. And you have to stir them around quickly, get all the mushrooms coated in the melted margarine. which is trans fat free, and I should also say non-dairy, just for those who may not know, because this is kosher and we don't use anything with any dairy products when we're cooking meat. And you can see it's very dry on the bottom of the pan. The mushrooms are beginning to take on a little bit of color. Okay, the mushrooms are just barely cooked. So I'm going to take them with a slotted spoon. This is a slotted spoon with holes in it, so if there is any liquid that's in the mushrooms, it will seep out of the spoon, and all I'll have left are the mushrooms. And I'm going to put these into a bowl and then go on and make the onions. Now we're going to braise the onions. In order to braise the onions, which means basically cooking something in just a small amount of liquid over a period of time, one of the things we need is an herb bouquet. You can buy little bags with little strings where you can tie it together, or you can just cut a piece of cheesecloth. This has some thyme, some peppercorns, a bay leaf, some fresh parsley, and with not too much dexterity, although I'm all thumbs here, you tie this up. When I first started to make this, I actually did use fresh pearl onions, and I soaked them in hot water and I peeled each one, and it's truly a pain in the neck. When they came about with bags of frozen onions, they used to be pound bags. Now all the 16-ounce bags are now 14-ounce bags. So though the recipe may require a pound of onions, I wouldn't worry about using more than 14 ounces in a plastic bag. The recipe won't suffer from it. We have our onions in the pan and our herb bouquet in the pan, and now I'm adding about a half a cup of red wine, the same wine that I use for the beef. When you choose the red wine for any of these things, you don't have to choose the most expensive wine, but you shouldn't choose a wine that you wouldn't want to drink, because it is going to be flavoring all your food. So if it's going to taste like acid in a glass, it's going to taste like acid in the meat. So choose something that's actually pleasant to drink. And this is going to come to a boil, and then we're going to reduce it to a simmer. I'm going to cover it, and it's going to cook probably about 20 minutes until the onions are all red, and they're soft because, in fact, they're not as firm as fresh white onions would be, but they are delicious anyway. And it saves a lot of time instead of peeling 50, 60 onions. Sometimes I can tell when things are ready just by smelling them and not even checking my watch. So I can smell that these onions are ready to go. So I'm taking the top off. It really, I'm sorry you all aren't here, it's just amazing. And I will take the stove off, and then again with our slotted spoon, take the onions and add them to the mushrooms. And then these will just hang out and wait until the beef is ready. Our herb bouquet is still sitting in there, so all those things, the peppercorns and the parsley, isn't a problem with the onions. And you can see how pretty that looks. It's all those beautiful red onions now and the mushrooms, and that will just sit and wait for the beef to be ready to mix it all together. These are the onions and mushrooms from before. I'm going to take the slotted spoon, I'm going to remove the beef and add the beef to the onions and mushrooms so we can pour off the fat. You've got two options with doing this. Either you can now chill everything and chill the sauce so that you can just easily lift off the fat and chill the other ingredients as well, or you can just pour off the fat right now, which is what we're going to do, and continue with our recipe. There's really not that much fat here, so it's not a bad option. Now I'm going to bring what's left over after I've removed the beef to a simmer. And while that's simmering, I'm taking a couple of tablespoons of coconut spread, trans fat free and non-dairy coconut spread. You really won't taste the coconut with all the other flavors going on in here. And I'm mixing that into a paste with a few tablespoons of flour just to thicken the gravy. And you'll see what happens when I whisk it into the gravy. It creates a really beautiful, shiny sauce. I'm going to add this paste into the gravy. And then quickly whisk it around so that everything is all mixed up and a smooth sauce is formed. And you can take your wooden spoon again, and you can see if it coats the wooden spoon, then it's a beautiful gravy for the beef. Okay, I'm going to turn that off and add all our ingredients back into the beef. I'm going to stir it all around so that all the ingredients, all the onions and the mushrooms and the beef, get all married together and all sit in this amazing sauce. And there you have an absolutely wonderful Boeuf Bourguignon. Okay, I'm going to spoon some of this fabulous Boeuf Bourguignon into a serving dish. Traditionally, you would serve Boeuf Bourguignon with noodles or rice or boiled potatoes, but you could also serve it with farro, with orzo, or the sauce is so fabulous you could just spoon it into a baked potato. Leave comments and suggest recipes here, and click to subscribe and for new recipes here. Hope to see you often.